last part. All right. All right. In this last part of the mini lectures, we are going to talk about how we can have non-chemical water pollution. That is a thing. Yep. And then we're also going to talk about the laws that we have to help prevent water pollution and keep our drinking water safe. Okay, so let's talk. All right, so we can have junk in our water, right? Garbage. It's gross. And we've seen, we've heard of like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And if you haven't, just wait. But you've been to the beach and you've seen trash wash up on the beach. Yeah, it's just gross. It's people are trashy and we need to fix it. So in the United States, they started really pushing to prevent trash being dumped along waterways, 70s and 80s, way back in the day, way before you were born. But it's really usually, Americans can be pretty trashy, but the majority of the trash and the plastics and stuff that are in the ocean today actually come from Asia. They are huge proponents of single-use plastics. So, and they don't really recycle them. They don't have the facilities for it. So that can be an issue. On that note, the pandemic has actually spurred a new issue of the surgical masks, the single-use masks. A lot of people don't dispose of them properly, and a lot of those are ending up in the waterways, and it's bad stuff. That's why I try to use my cloth ones and wash and reuse, because I don't bothers me. All right. Okay. So you can also have what we call sediment pollution. So sediment pollution is just stuff that gets washed into the water. And in a lot of times it just comes from natural sources. Gravel, rocks, sand, those are all considered sediment. If you we have quarries, stuff that's left over from the quarry, gypsum and limestone dust, all that kind of stuff, that gets washed away as well. So, when something gets eroded, gets washed away, that's going to end up that's a sediment pollution. So what happens is that can cause cloudy water, and we call that turbidity. Yeah, turbidity. Turbidity, turbidity. And the higher the turbidity, the more clouded the water is, the less it's not clear at all. So what happens with that is sunlight cannot penetrate through that water very well, and then therefore photosynthesis cannot really is harder to occur with those aquatic plants and algae. Sediments can also do bad stuff like clog pipelines, but then more importantly for things like the fish and other organisms, a fish's gills are very sensitive. And if there's a lot of sediment in the water, that can be bad for them because they can have a harder time getting oxygen into their lungs. They don't have lungs. What am I saying? Into their gills. All right. Thermal pollution. I talked about this a little bit in the very first part. So thermal pollution is where the water has a fairly sudden change in temperature, usually hot. It can be cold, but usually it's thermal pollution because the water temperature is too high and it's not adequate for that environment. Thermal shock is whenever it's too drastic of a change and the organisms that live there can have a really tough time adapting, if they can adapt at all. So that obviously is a problem. Again, that is very commonly related to industrial waste. And then we also have noise pollution in the water. Yeah, think about it. So sound moves much more readily through water than it does the air, because water is more dense. And so therefore it actually travels faster through water. And think about the organisms that communicate. Whales, dolphins, we have fish, we have organisms that really need to be able to communicate to each other in the water. But if there are ships, boats, reverberations from things, human activities that are occurring on land, that can totally affect that. So that can really be dangerous. So now one of the things is they're trying to promote shipbuilders to use quieter propellers. Like a nuclear submarine is silent. It's dang near silent. So they're trying to utilize some of that technology in some of the ships and stuff too to kind of help prevent some noise pollution. Okay, let's talk about laws. All right, we all have heard of the Clean Water Act, but what does it do? Okay, so the Clean Water Act, what it does is it helps to maintain and protect living organisms that are in or on the water. Okay, so basically we try, and it can also help to restore surface waters here in the United States in case they are contaminated. And so it's not only to help protect people, but it's also used to protect other organisms and the environments themselves. And so they do have very defined quality standards that they have to adhere to. And so the EPA, state agencies will go out and do random tests and to determine whether or not a body of water meets those requirements. And if not, then they try to go back and find, is it a point source of pollution? What caused it? How can it be remediated? Does that organization that was responsible need to be fined, et cetera, et cetera. Then, more so to protect humans, we have the Safe Water Drinking Act. And basically, what the Safe Water Drinking Act does is it says, look, these are all the bad things that could be in our drinking water. And the maximum containment levels, the MCLs, that these are the cutoff points for which we, if our levels are higher than this, then it is unsafe. And this goes for both surface water, meaning that like if our water were to come from a river or a lake and it were treated, or from groundwater, like here in San Antonio. So the maximum containment level is established by the EPA, and they've used all sorts of different tests and protocols to determine what is considered safe. And again, there's tons and tons of testing that goes on randomly, often, and sometimes repeatedly if there's an issue. So these are a few of the clues of some of the MCLs. ppb stands for parts per billion, like Giardia, fecal coliform. There's not allowed to have any in there. Things like arsenic, since there is some that exists naturally, there is about a 10 parts per billion max for that. Mercury's very low. Benzene and atrazine are two of the organic chemicals that are sometimes that can be really bad for humans and for other organisms, and it gives their MCLs here as well. So here in this table, which is also in your book, it kind of gives you some information as to what some of the major causes and sources are of some of these issues. And, the thing is, we live in a developed country, right? In the developing countries, they a lot of times don't have the funding, the sources, they don't have what's needed to test the water. So it is becoming more important for them to do so because they are, it is now better understood that it can be a negative, not only for the environment, but for their people as well. All right, that's where we're going to end this. Chapter 14, done.